Today, I'm joined by Jason Poe, a wealth advisor and partner at SageSpring Wealth Partners, and the author of the upcoming skinny book, The Evolve Advantage. This conversation is a refreshingly simple yet powerful look at financial habits. Jason introduces a concept he calls wealth hygiene, daily practices that can quietly, powerfully shape your future. We also explore why money is so emotional and how to plan for life's curveballs and what it really means to build towards freedom, not just security. This episode is a reminder that small financial habits done consistently can quietly shape the life you want. And don't forget, because Jason is a wealth advisor, please review the show notes for all proper disclosures. I'm your host, Katherine Jelinek, and this is the Expanders Podcast, presented by The Skinny Platform, the place for entrepreneurs with something to share and who want to be heard. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today with Jason Poe, financial advisor and partner with SageSpring Wealth Partners, and soon to be coming out with his skinny book, The Evolve Advantage, helping you reach the outcome you deserve. Jason, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, Catherine. I appreciate it.
Yes, I'm so excited. So one of my favorite topics that we got to talk about when we did the interviews for your book is all around wealth hygiene. And for me, I'm obviously not a financial advisor and not in that world. But when you said that, it was like one of those moments where it's just like, oh, brain explosion, totally get it. So talk about wealth hygiene and what you mean by that term, and then when you started using it and why.
Sure. Well, I think the first thing about that is it's what we do is overcomplicated versus what it really is. It is pretty simple. It's about creating good habits, and that's where the whole kind of wealth hygiene thing came from. Honestly, it popped into my head in a meeting one day. I don't know, where it came from. I didn't, ponder it, a long time or anything, but I think it's the truth because if planning and saving for retirement, for your future, you don't have to do it, right? Now, it's smart to do so, but you don't have to. And when you look at going to the dentist, you don't have to go to the dentist, right? You probably should, but if you don't, right, your teeth don't fall out tomorrow or next week or next year, but 30 years from now, your teeth are going to fall out, right? I mean, eventually you're going to have a negative outcome. And I think that's that same way with saving and preparing for retirement is you don't have to do it now. It's way in the future. I'll worry about that one day. And then you wake up and that one day is here and you have the financial equivalent of your teeth falling. And going to the dentist and brushing your teeth are really about habits. Most of us, it's, hey, our parents, go brush your teeth before you go to bed or when you wake up in the morning or whatever. You got to go see the dentist, once a year, twice a year and do kind of your normal stuff to the point where it just becomes normal, right? It's what you do. And I think saving and preparing financially is just, starting off sort of early on with habits that over a period of time, you just do it. It's automatic. You don't even think about it.
When we were doing the interviews for your book, I feel like what I wanted immediately was to take what you shared and plug it into high schools and colleges, because it's like the fact that that isn't getting talked about there, but other things are that you don't use in adulthood. Like, I'm not trying to discredit the need for things like AP calculus, but like that's not what I'm living my life with right now, using ChatGPT and a calculator and everything's fine. But wealth hygiene and talking about astute financial practices, why wasn't that there? It's like such a gaping hole. And the thing I find so interesting about wealth hygiene as opposed to like dental hygiene, there's a whole rat's nest of emotion that gets tied up when we talk about money that isn't necessarily there when we talk about teeth.
Yeah.
It's a different thing to address. It's a different thing to have to navigate. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because it makes it so much more challenging to get
Um,
into good hygiene.
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as school, they teach you, math, and depending upon, the student and what have you, in high school and college, you might take more advanced, mathematics classes, but money is different than math, right? I mean, there's some connections, of course, but um, money, I think historically, at least my experience has been that you don't talk about money, right? It's not something if you go, have lunch with a friend or go grab a drink, So what are you doing, for your retirement? It didn't come up, and I think there's some generational aspects to it as well. Older folks, I mean, it was totally remote, right? You didn't talk about money, you didn't talk about religion, you didn't talk about politics. So I think it's kind of filtered down that way, and that's why we don't talk about it. But I will say, I think younger people are paying attention and talking about it more now than they were 25 years ago when I got in this industry. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but in school, nobody's saying, hey, debt is, you know, good or bad, or there's different kinds of debt. Some is good, some is bad. What's compounding mean? What is a reasonable rate of return? What is the time value of money? So I'd say money doesn't come with a manual. It's a how to or anything, and so it just gets pushed out into the future, and that's where you end up with folks knowing it's kind of intuitively, hey, this is important, I need to be doing it, but I don't know where to begin. It's not something that you really talk about, and so a lot of times people just don't take that first step.
Oh gosh, it's so many important things in life don't have that manual and don't have enough training before you get into it, like money management, long-term relationships, parenting, just to name a few. But like especially wealth hygiene when you're talking about for a person young or at any stage in life, when you finally start to be a person who's accumulating some money where you've got something to do with it, like you're accumulating wealth for the first time, that like, okay, what do I do now? Like there's no, yeah, like you said, it's either not getting talked about enough and also was never something that was regularly discussed in our education or in our organizations growing up. And so I love one of the stories that you brought up in the book, and it's really hit home with me and it's going to stick with me. And I'd love for you to share it as much that you feel is okay to share on the podcast. And it's the story of the young woman who was the daughter of one of your clients.
Yes, yes. So no, it is a great story, and it really, I think, makes the point. A client of mine, his daughter graduated from nursing school, so she was an LVN, not even an RN yet, right? And said, "Go talk to Jason." So she came in to see me, and I mean, she was 22 maybe, and it was my dad said to come in and do whatever you tell me to. Okay, well, that's simple, some of the basic stuff. She was okay. She didn't have any debt or anything like that. So it was, get an emergency fund because things happen. But really, it was, let's open it was a Roth IRA initially to get started and start putting money in on a monthly basis, right? And so we set up an automatic draft with the same amount on the same date every month would come in and get invested. And I'm a big fan of that, by the way. It's what I call dummy proofing your situation. I use that term for a lot of different things, but if you're going to remember to go, make that contribution every month, sure you. But if it happens automatically, then you get to the end of the year and it's actually happened.
Hmm.
But in her case, we started off small. I'm going to say maybe it was $100 a month or something. She went from LVN to RN to physician's assistant over the course of, I don't know, maybe it was 10 or 12 years. And we increased that amount over time to where we were, max funding her Roth IRA, and then we had brokerage accounts, and then eventually she ended up having a 401k available to the employer, and she just followed my advice, and kind of rule of thumb I think is to save, 10, 12, 15% towards retirement in some fashion with different types of accounts, of course. and we were staying right around that 15% once she kind of got it in gear. At the end of that 10 years or so, she had a pile of money when you think about just how small she started and that it was a relatively short period of time. But she put it in there, she forgot about it and let it do its thing and didn't, look at it, didn't freak out, hey, the market's doing this or that, or I need to hop in or out. She just, kind of set it, forget it, like I said, dummy proofed it and never looked back. And so I think the point there really is it's not difficult. It's really pretty easy if you just have those good habits, right? Back to our hygiene example there. She created good habits right out of college, and what I
Right.
told her wasn't magical or anything. I mean, it's just pretty, ho hum, kind of boring, but boring works.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing is, that's not boring. The outcome after sticking with it, that's the difference, is actually actualizing on that hygiene and making it the habit, right? So if it's okay to talk about the end of that story where she ends up getting married and her husband happens to be a wealth advisor.
Yeah, exactly. So I lost that client, and I understand why. It didn't hurt my feelings,
Yeah.
and I ought to look her up and see how she's doing, to be quite honest. But yeah, she, we're talking six figures, over the course of that 10 years, starting with, as I said, maybe 40 or $50 a month, initially. And, maybe in some way it helped her marriage prospects because she was a good,
Yeah.
saver
Comes
and
with
making,
dowry. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, making good financial decisions.
That's incredible. No, I mean the fact that like someone in their 30s can be moving with like, I mean, something like over 200,000 is incredible
Yeah.
just based on like small habits that didn't even feel noticeable when making them, like you said, dummy proofed.
Well, and I would also say this. I think savings is addictive, and what
Mm.
I mean by that is, when you first start off, it's a small amount. You think, I'm not even moving the needle. You get your statement a year later, and you think, hey, great. But everybody has a number where one day you're going to get that statement, or you're going to look online or whatever, and there's going to be a number that's like, oh wow, if I could do that saving 10% of my income, I bet I can figure out a way to save 12 or 15 or increase it or whatever the case may be because it gets exciting, right? You feel like you're getting some, you know, a 10% return on $100. Okay, great, right? But if it's a 10% return on 100,000, let's say, all of a sudden it's like, okay, that feels like, something that, I should be proud of. And I kind of like this feeling of success. And so I'm going to figure out a way to save more simply because it is oh, we've got the lawn guys in the back.
Landscaping behind you, yes. It's
But
good.
but no, it's as I said, I think it's a habit that if you're going to have one, it's a good one, right? Saving and being smart, starting early.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so overall, like, you know, most of the clients you work with are not as young as her. They're older. They come in either with having had good habits, wealth hygiene, or not. And we speak to your role, especially when you're addressing people where they're at whatever level of wealth hygiene they've come in with.
Yeah, well, you're correct. It seems like most people seek out a financial advisor. I'd say kind of that 40, 45, 50.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that they might not already be doing some things and doing them quite well, but I think part of that is it's, hey, I've established my career. My kids are in high school, out of high school, out of college, something like that. And there's competition for your resources, right? And so people feel like, hey, timing's good for whatever reason, and I'm making a pretty good number that I should be able to save more to move the needle, and just it becomes more of a priority. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Now, where I get the most satisfaction though is with like the nurse, um, when you're starting off small right? Because I know that it's going to turn into, a beautiful thing just because they're getting going and, educating them and, building kind of a foundation, a financial foundation, that they can then build their financial house on, right? But you got to have that good, strong foundation. And you can, I'm not saying there's shortcuts, but you can help people avoid some common mistakes,
Yeah.
which is helpful. Now, with, you know, people that are older, the font sizes are larger. Uh, um, you have a little bit different conversations. A lot of cases, it's, revolves around tax. I haven't met the person yet that enjoys paying taxes. Supposedly they're out there, but the unicorns, I haven't met one yet. And so, it's more of a, am I doing enough and what am I doing right? How do I, get to the finish line, meaning retirement?
Right. And you've mentioned before to me that like the wealth hygiene, the habits you should be doing show up differently in the accumulation phase and then the distribution phase. So more of like, when you're still making your wealth versus when you're in retirement. Can you just speak to that and what is wealth hygiene in those phases? How is it different?
Yeah, well, there are, two distinct phases. There's the accumulation phase, right? I'm building up all of this, stuff, wealth, so that I can, quit my perfectly good job
Yeah.
and, and kind of not run out of money before, you graduate, is the terminology. But no, it's, I like to think of it in the terms of sports. But there's this overarching sports, right? But as an example, there's football, there's baseball. They're both sports, but they are very different. The shape of the field, the tools, the number of players, what it is you're trying to accomplish are very different. And so, accumulation might be, hey, football, where distribution is baseball. And so, you want to think of things differently. Another way to kind of think of it is in terms of climbing Mount Everest, right, or any mountain for that matter. You go to the top of the mountain, but you have to get down. And lots of people, unfortunately, lose their life climbing Mount Everest. But my understanding is the majority of them do it on the way down, right?
Hmm.
So I think that people a lot of times hey, I've done a good job saving. I'm at the top of the mountain, but they need that help going down.
Yeah.
And they need a Sherpa, right? And that's, they're going to help you avoid, the mistakes on the way up. They're going to be able to show you the best route maybe for your ability. They're going to look at the weather and say, hey, this trip, you're not maybe going to make it to the peak, but we're going to get close. And then they get you safely down so that you can, say, hey, I climbed Mount Everest, and you're not, a sad statistic. So that's a couple of ways I like to think of the, accumulation and distribution phases.
Right, and that Mount Everest one is especially good for that difference between those two phases of yes, you're making it, and then when you're in the distribution phase, it's about not losing it. You know,
Correct.
like something my husband says all the time that he's in the financial world and trading and markets, but it's like it's about just not losing. That's how you can stay. Like that's just staying in the game isn't always winning. It's just not losing as big.
Sure, sure. Yeah. I mean, and of course, with the market, you're going to have some ups and downs,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you've got to understand that, back to our coming down the mountain, that, there are going to be, routes that are more or less difficult or more or less dangerous, maybe. And so you need to understand, and be aware of what those may be, and then be in good enough shape so that you can make it down. Typically, with clients that are on that distribution side, we're gonna take less risk,
Hmm.
buckets of money to make the walk down a little easier. It's you don't want to be looking for a job at 95, so you want to be careful.
No, 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 no. Even though for some reason at 95, I would love to still be up to something.
Well, sure. Yeah. I'm not saying, give up, but
No. Yeah, I don't think you are.
yeah,
But I do think it's an interesting and thinking about climbing the mountain. It's two different levels of fitness, that ascent and descent energy, and also the hygiene, the behaviors, the habits, what to watch out for. Very different, hard to navigate that switch from the top.
yeah.
And
Again,
yeah,
we're still in that money's emotion,
yes,
so
yes.
that makes it that much more difficult, I think.
Oh, and then back to this, the taboo, the not spoken about. It's so closely woven to our worth and our identity, and kind of sticky topics for any person. How do you, as the Sherpa, help navigate the fact that wealth and money is so deeply intertwined with emotion?
Well, I think dealing with emotion, there's lots of, I guess, different variations of it. But the one that is, I think, someone like myself, an advisor, helps people with the most are the emotions when things aren't going well, right?
Yes. Hmm.
I mean,
The other ones are fun, right? It's like, all right, get the
hard
champagne out. Good for you.
uh, no one has a problem with the going up, right?
Yeah.
It's the going down where things get a little bit more interesting for people. But it's a situation where you know, I mean, here's an example. Let's say somebody invests 500,000, it grows to 1 million, and then it goes down to 800,000. Jason, I lost money. Like, no, you didn't. You started with 500. You have 800. You have more than when you started. So I think some of it, mental accounting that people do, can get them off track to a certain degree. I think that when you got to sit steady in the boat, keep a stiff upper lip, right? When you're in a storm. So with
Hmm.
clients, we try to talk through. Let's make decisions when there's no ripples on the water, right? When the seas are smooth, and we can, be level-headed, right? But knowing we're going to have times where there's a storm, right? And the waves are going to get big, and it's not going to be, nearly as much fun. But you've got to get through the storm in order to, um, make it to your destination. Or to say it another way, right? It's I'm in Texas, so a lot of sun here, but we do get rain. And when it rains, you don't say, "Hey, it's going to rain forever." You say, "Yeah, it's going to rain for a few days or whatever. The sun's going to come back out." And it's like that with the market. When things go down, you've got to remember emotionally that this is not going to last forever. Quite frankly, it's normal, just like rain or just like a storm if you're out in the boat somewhere. Um, and just prepare, know what's normal, know what's going to happen, and that if we're doing a financial plan, that we build these kinds of events into your plan. Not that we know when they're going to happen, how long they're going to last, how significant they may be, but that they're normal, and we're planning for them, even though we don't like it. Right? We're going to throw in a rain jacket and an umbrella if we're going
Hmm.
for a walk, or however you want to think of it. So that's part of it. But also we try to get to know our clients. I mean, some people are risky, some people are conservative, and there's everything in between. And it's not that one is better or worse than the other. They're just different. I mean, some people like red, some people like blue, and we need to plan for that. But everybody has a number, whether they know it or not. Where if your account goes down this much, you're going to go from being a rational person to an irrational person. So our goal is to hopefully never put you in a scenario where you're irrational, because we know by definition, irrational people make poor decisions, right?
Hmm.
So we want to get to know our clients well. Um, and sometimes it's a couple even, and there's a conservative and a risky, so we got to marry that together. But I
Hmm.
think that a lot of different examples there are ways to think of it. But yeah, emotion is, I think, probably the biggest thing that we help people with.
Yeah. And they don't, no one thinks about that when you're signing up to have a financial advisor. I'm coming here to have my financial emotions assisted, but it's really the truth, and we all know it. I want to swing into the book and your specific process that's shared in the book, The Evolve Advantage. dive in and tell us about those 5 steps, and then we'll talk about each of those and ask further questions.
Okay, sure, sure. Well, really evolve means change, right?
Yes.
So that's where it starts with is things are going to be changing always, right?
Mhm.
From today until next week, something's going to be different with me, something's going to be different with you, whether that's financially, whether that's emotionally, whether it's something with the kid or your job, or, it could be anything. So things are always changing. And the evolved advantage is, we want to be aware of that and we want to sort of use it to our advantage, right? We want to evolve financially as these different things happen, right?
Mhm.
The E in the evolve is established, right? And so you want to figure out, where am I right now? Whether you're that 22, 25-year old, whether you're, 50, 55, 60, where are you now financially, right? What's your financial? And it's a bit like if you were going to go on take a trip or a road trip, right? What do you got to do? Well, back when we actually pulled out maps, we said, okay, here's where I am, here's where I want to go. What's the most efficient route to get there? So, and that's what the establish is. It's, hey, I'm at point A, right? And then, from there, we can look at, we want to visualize where we go, right? I found in Dallas and I say, hey, I want to go to Houston, all right? So that's the goal, right? So that's our visualize, that's the V. Orient is what's the path to get there, right? I mean, in my example here, it's get on I-45, right? If you're in Dallas, you're going south, you're headed to Houston. And then learn is, you can learn, where I need to stop to get gas, where I need to stop to eat, what potential, detours or construction are. Hey, there's highway patrol who like to hang out, in this area, right? So you want to kind of learn options. Is there another way to go that's not 45, that's more scenic, right? It might take me longer, it might not be as efficient, but it still gets me there, and it's a bit more enjoyable. Now,
Mm.
now vote is when you act, right? You say, hey, okay, I've made the decision. I'm going to get in my car and go. I'm done. I've determined where I am, where I want to go, the route that I'm going to take. I've learned, what to be careful about, and now I'm going to turn on the car and step on the gas, right? Another way to think of that is planning a trip. If you were, when you get on the airplane, you voted, right? I mean, you're taking off.
Mhm.
And then the last is evaluate, right? Because things are not going to happen exactly the way that we say, right?
Never.
Again, back to our trip, there could be a car accident, all right? All of a sudden, hey, our plan was to be there at 4 o'clock, and because of that, we're not, we're going to be to Houston at 5. And so, we evaluate, what do we need to do? Change our dinner plans that we had at 6 or something, right?
Mhm.
Um, and it's a circle, right? Because when we evaluate, it's back to, here's what we said was going to happen. Here's what really did happen. What has changed in your life, right? That um, over last year or whatever the case may be. And then we reestablish, where you are, and we play the game again. And that's how we evolve, right? And because we do some different iterations of your plan over time, and things change in your life, like, hey, I got a pay raise, or I had a child, or I lost my job. Because sometimes there are those negative things as well.
So, what I love about Evolve, and I'm going to restate those letters real quick here in a second, but it's a very simple formula. It's like, of course, but then the obviousness of it is similar to Wealth Hygiene. The real power is in actually executing and taking each of those steps intentionally, and that's the entire difference between true Wealth Hygiene, like actually getting the benefit of the
Mhm.
Evolve advantage, and being a little willy nilly with your finances and not maybe executing to the point that getting the outcome you really desire or deserve, right? So it's established that here I am today. This is the point from which I move, the vision where I want to go in the future, my dream. The orientation is the options and the ways that I intend to get there, the
Mhm.
financial tools and places that I
Sort of
intend to.
where my relation to my goals.
Yes, yes. And then, so is it that one where the planning of like, what am I going to use to get to my vision, or is it the learn?
Well, the learn is what your options, because very seldom is there a silver bullet,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Right.
There's usually, here's two or three ideas. Here's sort of those pros and cons associated with them. Um, they may all work just fine, but one speaks to someone differently than another. I mean, some things you can clearly say, "Hey, this doesn't," right? And so that's not something that we're gonna, with a client, we're not gonna, necessarily educate you on something we know is not going to work, for to solve
Doesn't take you to
a
your
problem
vision.
or reach your goal. But here's the tax consequences with a Roth versus a traditional versus, a taxable account or whatever way. It's just a broad example. But here's your options. You're an adult. You're a big boy. You're a big girl. What fits best, based on the education that we're giving you, right? To learn for you, you make a decision, and then we're going to help you implement it and manage it over time towards that ultimate goal. Um, if that makes sense.
It does. Isn't that also the phase where you're addressing and planning, buffering, budgeting for the fact that things will go up, things will go down, the storms will come, the rain will come, all that stuff, learn is like where you're also planning and navigating for what isn't going to be exactly what you expect.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we kind of touch on those things almost at every step
Sure.
because
Part of each.
repetition works.
Yeah.
I think, we want to, um, always be sort of dripping on somebody that, it's, this is, it's like, I think it was Muhammad Ali, or maybe it was Mike Tyson. Everybody has a plan until they get, hit in the face.
Yeah.
And so that's what this is. I mean, there are going to be things that don't happen as intended, and we're making our assumptions are very conservative, right? We're not saying we have to run the table, we have to be perfect because that's not going to happen. But yeah, I mean, it's in the plan really when we're actually saying, right, in your plan, here's where you are, here's where you said you want to go, here's the things you're doing right now. If we continue this, hey, we're going to hit your goal or we're not. If you make this adjustment, that increases the odds that we're going to hit the goal or whatever the case may be. And so, it's a long way of saying I think really those are things that we hit
At each of them. No,
at
that
each
makes sense.
stage. Yeah.
That makes sense. That you have to like navigate the potentials for things to not go as expected in each step of planning around your wealth. That makes sense. And then vote, you put it into action and evaluate at the end. I think, I don't know. I want to hear what you think on like which one is the most important step or letter for this. I guess for me, I think evaluate is the key because it's about the ever iteration, realizing it's always the tweaking and the tweaking and the tweaking and the reassessing. Because even in the name of this, evolve, it's that nod and recognition of the naturalness that things are not staying the same. Like your plan, your situation, your intentions, they are all ever evolving, and you have to keep readjusting for that.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Because your goals do change, right? But I mean, it's tough to say which one's more important. I mean,
Yeah.
establish is good because it means, hey, I'm, you know, getting some momentum, right? I'm actually gonna take a step towards, something concrete. Vote, it would be up there because that's when it's not, hey, I'm kicking tires. I've voted. I'm going to buy this car, right? But I think without the evaluate, none of it really works because, I mean, let's look at myself. I was a very different person at 25, 35, 45. My priorities, what was important to me, what I wanted my future to be, um, changes. So that's why that evaluate. Part of it is, are things happening the way they should, but also, how, if my goals change. So, a big one we see with folks is, you know, we've planned for this particular retirement. They're getting really close to, hanging it up, and it's, hey, Jason, we're going to move to Houston. I thought you hated Houston. We do, but that's where my grandkids are. So we never planned to go to Houston, but that's where we're going to be because we want to be close to the grandkids, right? And it's maybe a silly example, but it's true. I mean, that's something that we see a lot because I think once upon a time, we kind of all stayed in the general geographic area, but that's not the case anymore. And from here in Dallas, Houston's one thing, but what if it's on the West Coast or the East Coast, right? I mean, and so people do pick up and move, but that's why you want to, you know, again, evolve and really evaluate and make sure that goals haven't changed. And if they have, to make those adjustments. And are we still doing everything to get where we ultimately want to be, our destination, as efficiently as possible?
I love it. It's delightfully simple. I love that you highlight how important vote is. I remember from when we worked on the book together, that was like the shortest chapter because it's like, okay, hop into action. But I love that you highlight how it is the most important. If you don't set it into motion and actually take the step and decide, none of this matters. Like it's not anything unless you put your money where your mouth is, right? And like put the plan into motion. So that's a good highlight there.
You can talk about, hey, I'm going to lose weight, right? But
Right.
until you start exercising or adjust your diet or something, all it is talk, right? I mean, it's good intentions, but you're not going to solve the issue, or reach your goal of, hey, I want to lose weight until you actively, put something in place and take that first step.
Hmm. That action is the whole difference between actually having wealth hygiene or not. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I mean, back to that, you got to take the action of, uh, even if you're brushing your teeth, right? You still have to take that action and say, hey, I'm going to go get my teeth cleaned, twice. I mean, you have to do it. Or, take it a little further. If you want your teeth to be more straight, right? Hey, you got to take that action and go see an orthodontist. And I think where myself and most financial advisors, I'll tell you, do a fantastic job. I think most of us, our hearts are in the right places, and we want to see the people that we work with succeed. Um, but it is, I mean, we're kind of a coach, right? If you're going to lose weight, right, and you want to start working out and you never have, hey, you might need a trainer. It doesn't mean that you couldn't get online or get a book and build a workout strategy or something, but there's motivation in, hey, this person's waiting for me to be at the gym at 7 a.m. and I'm going to let them down if I'm not there. And when I get there, I don't have to think. Right? They're going to say, hey, here's the workout that we need to do today to get you towards your goal. So you can't tell yourself, well, I'm just going to go easy today, but I'll work out harder next time. I mean, they're going to push you, and they're going to make sure that you hit the different muscle groups or whatever it may be, that you're getting plenty of cardio along with resistance training and those sorts of things. And same thing with in the diet. If you have a dietitian, right, they're going to help you determine kind of what's your what establish, right, where what your habits now, and work on the goal to, hey, what changes do we need to make, what adjustments, what's the smart thing to do, what's going to get us to our destination maybe the quickest. And there's some rah-rah in there, but it's accountability partner, but it's when you're frustrated, it's somebody to lean on. And then there's sometimes it's, hey, Jason, I'm thinking about doing this or that financially, what do you think? And so it's a lot of just being a sounding board for someone who maybe doesn't have uh, a trusted person that is they can talk about financial matters with, or maybe plenty of trusted people, but their expertise in finance. And so you need someone to tell you, hey, this is a good idea or a bad idea. Have you thought about this? Here's a different wrinkle on
Yes. Well, it's interesting. I mean, in every area of our life that really matters, we really do need partnership and accountability in order to make the most out of it. And I mean, we can talk about, there's different opinions and everything and different people that you could have in your corner regarding wealth, but it's key to like from this episode, from your book, from any of these conversations, to just be questioning, like, do I have the people regarding wealth hygiene? How am I doing? Number one. And then what do I actually need to get to where I want to be with it? Number two, in terms of accountability, other people involved, and, different opinions than the ones or the lenses and views on what's possible than the ones oneself has.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's conclude here with just highlighting a little bit about we've talked about the book in terms of like the evolved advantage and the fact that that process is, codified in the book, but it's coming out in the next few weeks. Who'd you really write the book for?
I don't know. I mean, I just selfishly, probably myself. I've just feel like I've picked up a trick or two along the way, and the idea of sharing it with others is attractive to me. And So I think it was as simple as that. It's not that I'm trying to write some bestseller or anything necessarily. I had something to say, and I learned about the skinny platform, and so I needed a coach, I needed a Sherpa, right,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, to help me with this, and so that's really a big part of it too. It's like when you meet a Sherpa, maybe you want to go climb a mountain.
Wow. Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure being a part of your Sherpa team. And that's, part of doing books like this where they're spoken rather than written in terms of the process that they begin from. It's fun the whole time, at least from my seat.
Yeah, no, it's been great, and everyone involved, and I'm, excited to be at the finish line or maybe the starting line, depending on
Yeah.
how you look at it. But no, it's been a great process, and I'll be forever grateful to you guys, and hopefully other people will find my book useful. If not, maybe you need more stuff.
Well, thank you, by the way, Jason, for the sweet words. I was not expected to have a skinny commercial there, and I appreciate it.
And, I really am appreciative.
Oh, well, thank you. I'd encourage listeners, this book is coming out in the next few weeks. We will definitely be posting about it so you can stay up to date by following the Skinny platform. And I'd definitely encourage readers and listeners to purchase it for a young person in your life, because that I find listening to Jason's story, hearing the story of that young woman and the impact of wealth hygiene practices when begun at a younger age. I mean, how much impact you can have on a person's life when they begin to think and behave like this around money at an earlier age. So just pick up that book or start that conversation with a younger person, especially, and know that you're passing on habits that can really make a difference in someone's life.
Yeah, yeah, I'll agree with you. I think, if you're in particular an older person, find somebody at your job or a friend or something, put your arm around them and say, you know, start saving, start building those good habits. Here's an instruction manual.
Yes. Well, I think it's just part of starting to open up that taboo that we do have still in the culture where we're not talking about things like wealth and money, and making it a little more normalized to be able to ask for input and relate to others and hear shared experiences on what's worked or maybe the lessons learned on what doesn't.
Yep, I agree.
All right, Jason. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your wisdom from the past, 25, 30 years in this book. And I'm excited to get to share it with others here in the next few weeks. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Expanders Podcast, presented by The Skinny Platform. You can catch more episodes and be notified of newly released episodes by following us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or subscribing on YouTube. For more information on the Expanders Podcast and The Skinny Platform, visit our website, www.theskinnyplatform.com.